The moment Vincent Reynolds stepped into the bustling diner, he knew something was wrong. The energy in the place was tense. Servers rushed between tables, the kitchen clattered with urgency, and the line of waiting customers stretched out the door. But what caught his attention most was the young hostess, barely 18, crouched in the corner near the entrance, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed quietly. Vincent had bought this chain of diners 5 years ago, expanding it to 11 locations across the state. He had built his career from the ground up, but lately, reports from corporate had raised concerns about this particular location: low employee retention, poor customer reviews, and complaints about management. He was tired of secondhand reports. He needed to see the truth for himself. Dressed in a worn-out hoodie, jeans, and a baseball cap, Vincent had walked in as just another customer. This diner was one of many, and none of the staff had ever met him in person. It was a corporate chain, and as the CEO, his face wasn't plastered anywhere. His disguise was enough to keep him anonymous. Glancing around, he noticed the restaurant was severely understaffed. Only 2 servers managed the packed dining floor, and the kitchen staff looked overwhelmed. The manager, a stocky man in his late 40s with a permanent scowl, barked orders from behind the counter, but did little else. Vincent approached the young hostess cautiously. "Hey," he said gently. "Are you okay?" She sniffled and wiped her eyes, looking up at him. Her name tag read Paige Emerson. Her red eyes and trembling hands told him she had been crying for a while. "I'm fine," she mumbled, quickly standing up and straightening her uniform. But she wasn't fine. Not even close. Before he could say anything else, the manager stormed over.
"Paige, what the hell are you doing?" he snapped.
"Get back to work. We don't have time for your drama." Paige flinched. I don't care." The manager cut her off. "You're not paid to cry. You're paid to seek customers.
Move."
Vincent felt his jaw tighten. The sheer lack of compassion in that man's voice was alarming. Paige swallowed hard, nodding quickly before rushing back to the host's stand, her hands still shaking. Something inside Vincent burned with anger. He wasn't just here to observe anymore. He was going to fix this. Vincent took a seat at the counter, positioning himself where he could observe the restaurant without drawing attention. The tension in the air was palpable. Every server moved with urgency, their faces tight with stress. The kitchen clattered endlessly, a constant barrage of orders being called out, but the sounds were more frantic than efficient. A waitress in her mid-20s rushed past him, balancing a heavy tray of food. There was exhaustion in her eyes. She barely had time to breathe between customers, much less exchange pleasantries. When she placed plates in front of a family seated near him, she forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. The moment she turned away, her expression fell into something hollow. It didn't take long for Vincent to realize how deep the problems ran. The manager, whose name tag read Ron, wasn't just harsh, he was neglectful. He spent more time standing behind the counter, barking demands, than actually helping his team. At one point, a server approached him, pleading for assistance because a table was complaining about cold food. Ron barely glanced up. "That's not my problem. Tell the kitchen to fix it." The server hesitated, clearly at her limit. "But they're already backed up. We don't have enough hands." "Then work faster," Ron interrupted before turning away. Vincent's stomach tightened. Leadership like this poisoned an entire workplace. Employees weren't just overworked, they were completely unsupported. It was no wonder customer service had taken a hit. He turned his attention back to Paige. She was doing her best, forcing a polite demeanor as she greeted guests and managed the long waitlist. But every so often, her fingers twitched as she adjusted menus, a sign that her earlier breakdown wasn't entirely behind her. When a particularly impatient customer snapped at her about the wait time, she apologized profusely, her voice small. The customer rolled their eyes and muttered something under their breath before turning away. Paige swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the host's stand. Vincent had seen enough. He stood and made his way toward the kitchen entrance. If he was going to get the full picture, he needed to see what was happening behind closed doors. The moment he stepped into the back, the air grew thick with heat and tension. The kitchen was a chaotic mess. Steam billowed from the grills, plates stacked dangerously high, and the few cooks on shift were working double time to keep up. Orders were piling up faster than they could be sent out. A young line cook with sweat dripping down his face frantically flipped burgers while another scrambled to plate dishes. A loud crash echoed as a pan hit the ground. A dishwasher barely out of his teens cursed under his breath, scrambling to clean up the mess. No one stopped to help. No one could afford to. Vincent caught sight of a man in a grease-streaked apron, clearly the head cook. He looked like he hadn't had a break in hours. His movements were rushed but precise, his focus locked on his station. Ron stormed in, looking irritated. Why the hell is table 6 still waiting? They've been complaining for 10 minutes. The head cook didn't even look up. Because we're short-staffed, Ron. You want it faster? Get back here and help. Ron scoffed. Not my job. Vincent clenched his fists. He had built this company on the belief that a restaurant was only as strong as its team. A good leader didn't just give orders, they stepped in when needed. Ron, however, had made it clear he had no interest in supporting his employees. As Vincent turned back toward the dining floor, Paige was once again in his line of sight. A server had just rushed past her, accidentally knocking a stack of menus from her hands. She bent down quickly to gather them, and when she stood, Ron was looming over her. "What are you doing?" His tone was sharp. Paige straightened, gripping the menus tightly. I was just picking these up." Ron exhaled angrily. "You're too slow. You waste time crying, and now you're wasting time standing around? If you can't handle it, maybe you should just quit." Paige's face paled. Vincent had heard enough. He stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Maybe the problem isn't her." Ron turned, his expression irritated. "Who the hell are you?" Vincent took off his cap. The moment recognition flickered in Ron's eyes, his posture stiffened. "I'm Vincent Reynolds," he said evenly. "And I own this restaurant." The entire floor went silent. Servers froze mid-step. Cooks peeked out from the kitchen. Even customers who had overheard the exchange turned to watch. Ron's face went from red to pale in seconds. "Sir, Vincent ignored him and turned to Paige instead. Her hands were still trembling, but now, confusion and shock had replaced her earlier fear. "Are you okay?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. But Vincent knew better. He turned back to Ron. "We need to talk." Ron opened his mouth, likely to make excuses, but Vincent wasn't interested in hearing them. He gestured toward the back office, and after a tense pause, Ron walked ahead reluctantly. Vincent followed, his mind already made up. The office door shut behind them, sealing off the curious gazes from the dining floor. The room itself was cramped, cluttered with stacks of paperwork, an aging computer, and a half-empty styrofoam cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of burnt coffee and grease that had seeped into the walls over time. Ron hesitated near the desk, visibly uneasy now that the weight of the situation had settled in. His earlier bravado had vanished, replaced by a thinly veiled attempt to appear composed. Vincent, however, wasn't interested in theatrics. He moved to the side of the desk, leaning against it as he crossed his arms. His gaze remained steady, unwavering. There was no need to raise his voice. The gravity of his presence was enough. Ron cleared his throat. "Mr. Reynolds, I didn't realize you were coming by today. If I had known, I would've." Vincent held up a hand, cutting him off. "That's exactly why I didn't announce myself." Ron's lips pressed together, his fingers twitching slightly at his sides. Vincent exhaled slowly. "I've spent the last hour watching everything unfold out there. You want to explain to me why this place is running like a sinking ship?" Ron shifted on his feet. "It's been a tough couple of months. Staffing issues, supply delays, unmotivated employees. Vincent's expression remained unchanged. Unmotivated. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. From what I saw, they're not unmotivated. They're exhausted. There's a difference. Ron opened his mouth, then closed it again. He knew better than to argue. Vincent continued, his tone measured. Explain something to me. Why is Paige crying in the middle of a shift? Ron exhaled sharply, as if irritated by the question.
She's soft.
Gets overwhelmed too easily. I've tried to toughen her up, but she's just not cut out for this. Vincent's jaw tightened. He had heard enough excuses. Toughen her up? He pushed off the desk, stepping closer. By belittling her? By telling her to quit?
That's not leadership, Ron.
That's bullying. Ron bristled, his face flushing. I don't have time to babysit. This is a business, not a daycare. Vincent's stare didn't waver. A business that relies on its people. And right now, those people are barely holding on. Ron scoffed, shaking his head. Look, I do what I have to do to keep this place running. I can't be soft on them, or they'll walk all over me. Vincent let the silence stretch between them. Then finally he spoke, his voice quieter this time. You think they respect you? Ron blinked, caught off guard. Of course they do. Vincent shook his head.
No, Ron.
They fear you. And fear doesn't build loyalty. It doesn't build a strong team. It builds resentment. Ron's shoulders squared, but Vincent could see the cracks forming. I built this company on the idea that every employee, from the kitchen to the front of the house, deserves respect, Vincent continued. I didn't come for money. I started in places like this, working shifts that stretched too long for pay that was too little. I know what it's like to feel invisible. Ron's jaw twitched, but he said nothing. Vincent exhaled, stepping back. I gave you the responsibility of running this place because I trusted you. But what I saw today, that's not leadership. That's mismanagement. Ron straightened. So, what are you saying? I'm saying you're done here, Vincent said, his voice firm but even. Effective immediately. Ron's face went rigid. You're firing me? Vincent nodded. Yes. Ron let out a bitter laugh. You're making a mistake. You think these kids can run this place without me? You think they'll last a week? Vincent didn't react. We'll manage. A tense moment passed before Ron exhaled sharply. Fine. He yanked open a drawer, pulling out his personal items with jerky movements. But don't come crying back when this place falls apart without me. Vincent didn't respond. He simply stepped aside, allowing Ron to storm past him and out of the office. The moment the door swung open, the dining area fell into silence. All eyes turned toward Ron as he stalked toward the exit, his posture stiff with anger. Paige stood near the host stand, her expression a mix of shock and uncertainty. The other employees watched cautiously, as if waiting for some kind of confirmation. Ron didn't say a word as he pushed through the front doors and disappeared into the parking lot. Vincent took a deep breath, then turned back toward the team. He met Paige's eyes first. You okay? He asked again. She hesitated, then nodded. But there was something different, this time a newfound steadiness in her expression. Vincent glanced around the room. I know today's been rough. I know things haven't been fair here. But that changes now. A murmur spread through the employees, a mixture of relief and cautious optimism. Vincent's gaze landed on the head cook, who had stepped out from the kitchen, arms crossed. What's your name? Luis, the man replied. Vincent nodded. Luis, how long have you been here? 3 years. And in those 3 years, how often did Ron actually help during a rush? Luis let out a dry chuckle. Never. Vincent's lips pressed together. That changes now, too. He turned back to the team. We're going to rebuild this place, but I can't do it alone. I need all of you. And that starts with making sure you're treated with the respect you deserve. A ripple of quiet agreement passed through the group. His gaze returned to Paige. And as for you, he paused, considering his next words carefully. I saw the way you handled those customers today. Even when you were struggling, you kept going. That says a lot about your character. Paige's eyes widened slightly. Vincent continued. I want to offer you a promotion. Assistant manager. The room went still. Paige's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out at first. Me, she finally managed. Vincent nodded. You. Her hands trembled again, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was disbelief. You don't have to answer right away, Vincent said. But I see potential in you. And I want to give you the chance that Ron never did. A long pause stretched between them before Paige swallowed hard and nodded. I'll do my best. Vincent smiled slightly. That's all I ask. A sense of quiet relief spread through the room. The tension that had weighed down the restaurant for so long was finally lifting. Vincent knew there was still work to be done. But for the first time in a long time, he felt certain that this place and the people inside it had a future worth fighting for. The restaurant didn't return to normal immediately. Change never happened in an instant. But as Vincent stepped back into the dining area, he could feel the tension beginning to ease. Employees exchanged cautious glances, uncertain but hopeful. Paige stood near the host's stand, still processing what had just happened. Luis, the head cook, wiped his hands on his apron and approached. His expression was unreadable, but there was a weight behind his eyes that Vincent recognized years of frustration finally balanced with something closer to relief. Luis spoke first, his voice steady. So, what now? Vincent glanced around at the staff. Now, we rebuild. A few of the employees exchanged glances, waiting for him to elaborate. He didn't blame them. They had likely heard empty promises before. But Vincent wasn't here to make vague assurances, he was here to fix what was broken. He turned to Luis. How bad is it in the kitchen? Luis exhaled through his nose, rubbing the back of his neck. We're running with half the people we need. The ones that are left, they're holding it together, but barely. Orders pile up faster than we can get them out, and when we fall behind, customers take it out on the servers. It's a mess. Vincent nodded. We'll get more staff in here. Effective immediately, we're increasing wages across the board. No more bottom-of-the-barrel pay. I want this to be a place people actually want to work. A murmur spread through the employees. Some of them looked skeptical, but others, especially the more experienced ones, seemed cautiously optimistic. One of the servers, a woman with tired eyes and a fraying uniform, hesitated before speaking up. And what about us? The ones who've been dealing with this for months? Vincent met her gaze. You deserve better. And you'll get it. Bonuses are coming for those of you who stuck it out through all of this. And if you're willing to stay, I want to hear what you need to make this place work again. The employees didn't respond right away, but their body language shifted. Shoulders straightened. Expression softened just a little. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. Vincent turned back to Paige, who was still at the host's stand. She had been quiet since their conversation, her mind clearly racing. He approached her carefully. You all right? Paige blinked, as if snapping out of her thoughts. I think so. Vincent studied her for a moment. She looked overwhelmed, but not in the same way as before. It wasn't fear anymore, it was something closer to disbelief. I meant what I said, Vincent told her. If you take the assistant manager position, I'll make sure you get the training and support you need. Paige hesitated. I've never done anything like that before. Vincent nodded. I know, but I've seen how you handle people. How you keep going even when things are tough. That's what a leader does. The rest? You can learn. Paige looked down at the menus in her hands, her fingers tracing the edges. Then she glanced back up at him. Okay, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I'll do it. A small wave of relief passed through Vincent. She was young and inexperienced, but she had the right instincts. That was more important than any title. Luis clapped his hands together once, breaking the moment. "So, does this mean we're actually going to have some help around here?" Vincent smirked no. He just smiled.
Yes.
"But first, I want to hear from all of you. What's been going wrong? What do you need to make this place better?" The employees hesitated, as if they weren't sure whether they should speak freely. But then, one by one, they started talking. The servers spoke about the overwhelming shifts, the lack of backup, and the constant pressure from customers. The kitchen staff described the broken equipment, the missing supplies, and the unrealistic expectations placed on them. Vincent listened, taking mental notes. Some of the problems were quick fixes, new hires, updated equipment, but others required a culture shift. By the time everyone had spoken, the atmosphere had changed. The employees weren't just venting anymore. They were engaging, offering ideas, discussing solutions. And that was when Vincent knew change was truly possible. "We start fresh," he said. "New leadership, better pay, real support. But it only works if we do it together." The employees exchanged looks, then nodded. It wasn't a miracle cure. It wouldn't erase the months of stress and frustration overnight. But for the first time in a long time, there was hope. And that was enough to begin. The next morning, Vincent arrived before sunrise. The diner sat still in the early light, its neon sign flickering faintly against the pale sky. He had spent the night drafting immediate changes, calling in reinforcements from corporate, and ensuring that by the time the staff walked in, they would see that things were already different. Inside, the air was thick with the remnants of stale coffee and grease, a scent that clung to the very bones of the place. The kitchen was silent, the dining floor barren, but soon it would be filled with movement. Vincent stood near the counter, rolling up his sleeves. Today, he wasn't here as a CEO overseeing changes from a distance. He was here to work. The first to arrive was Luis. He stepped through the door, rubbing his face before stopping short when he saw Vincent standing there. His eyes flickered with something between curiosity and skepticism. Vincent gave him a nod. There was no need for pleasantries. They both knew why they were here. Without a word, Luis moved toward the back, tying his apron with a measured grip. One by one, the rest of the staff trickled in. Paige walked in hesitantly, her uniform freshly pressed, her posture tentative, but more grounded than the day before. The servers arrived in quick succession, their expressions cautious, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop.
They weren't used to change coming this fast.
Vincent gathered them near the counter before the doors opened to customers. He kept his voice steady, clear. He told them about the new hires coming in over the next few days, about the immediate pay raises, about the updated scheduling system designed to prevent burnout. He didn't sugarcoat anything. This wasn't going to be an overnight transformation. But it was a start. Paige stood near the front, listening carefully. She absorbed every word, her hands clasped together in front of her. When Vincent finished, there was a long silence, then a few nods of understanding. The doors opened, and the morning rush began. For the first time in a long time, the employees weren't just surviving the shift, they were holding it together with a sense of control. Luis ran the kitchen with sharp efficiency, and Paige, though still adjusting to her new role, handled the front with surprising steadiness. Vincent didn't just watch. He worked. He bussed tables, took orders, and stepped into the kitchen when hands were needed. He moved between stations, observing, adjusting, reinforcing. He didn't have to say much. The employees saw him there, saw him working alongside them, and that spoke louder than any corporate memo ever could. By midday, something had shifted. There was still exhaustion, still moments of tension, but there was also something else, a quiet determination. During a brief lull, Vincent stood near the kitchen entrance, watching Paige as she handled a difficult customer. The man was frustrated about a mistake on his order, his voice sharp, but Paige didn't waver. She remained calm, listened, and resolved the situation without escalating it further. When she turned away from the table, she caught Vincent's gaze. He gave her a single nod, and she nodded back. No words were needed. As the afternoon wore on, Vincent took a moment to step outside. The air was crisp, the sky stretching wide above the lot. He exhaled, rolling his shoulders, feeling the weight of the morning settle into his muscles. Luis stepped out a moment later, wiping his hands on a rag. He leaned against the wall, glancing at Vincent. The silence stretched for a moment before Luis spoke. He didn't ask about corporate plans or long-term strategies. Instead, he said something simple. "You're serious about this?" Vincent met his gaze.
Yeah.
Luis studied him for a moment, then nodded. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic shift, just an understanding. Inside, the diner kept running. Orders were called, plates clattered, conversations wove through the air. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't just barely holding together. It was moving forward,